Hello and welcome to today's video. At a distance, these pens look pretty similar. One is a Parker, one is a Majohn. We have the Parker 25, a beautiful vintage pen that is sadly no longer in production, and the Majohn or Moonman B25. This pen was up in my list of top budget pen for last year, and this beautiful vintage pen I was able to get with the help of a viewer who had one for sale at a really reasonable price. I'm going to be comparing the Parker 25 with the Majohn B25 to see which is the right one for you. Please like and subscribe, hit the notifications button, all of that good stuff. I also have memberships available on this channel where for a small fee you can join what I'm calling the stationery drawer, and as a member of my channel you will get priority comments, you will get early access to all my videos, you will get members only content, and once I've built up that community a little bit we'll start doing some members only Q&As. So please throw some support in the way of this channel to keep all of this going for you. In the meantime, let's check out these two interesting and very cool pens. Okay, so Parker 25, Moonman B25. Love this pen, really enjoyed this pen. I had this pen first, and when I did the review I said I didn't have one of these, the Parkers, and I said initially I wasn't even necessarily super, sort of focused on getting one. And then a viewer said, I have one, would you like it for X amount of money, which was considerably lower than ones I've seen online and things, which was very gracious of the particular viewer who hasn't given me permission to share their name. So thank you very much. You know who you are. But today we are just going to show these two. So I've come up with a little bit of a criteria sort of setup to compare pens. And this is a hard one because they're so similar in so many ways. But I'm going to talk about a number of features, pros and cons for each, and some dimensions and all that kind of stuff. We'll do a writing sample and see which one I personally prefer. Okay, so let's start with dimensions. So both of them have a grip section of 8 millimeters. They're both pretty much exactly the same. The barrel, 9.2 millimeters on the Parker and 9.3 on the Moonman. Both pens have a capped length of 131 millimeters, an unposted length of 119 for the Parker and 120 for the Moonman, and a posted length, make sure we put the right pen on the right, cap on the right pen, a posted length of 143 and 142 for the Moonman. So very sort of similar in size. Now, one measurement I did make was end of the pen to end of the section, so before the nib, because the nib is sort of the biggest difference in these two pens. You see the Parker has its wraparound nib, whereas the Moonman just has sort of a smaller nib. Both have plastic feed, but the Parker is a very unique. You also notice the blue is slightly different. It's a richer, more sort of a deep blue on the Parker and a more sort of vibrant, cheap blue on the Moonman. But that end of pen to end of section measurement, end of pen to end of section measurement on the Parker was 106.7 and on the Moonman was 107.2. So half a millimeter difference. So really nothing. The side by side, they are virtually the same pen, same design, same model, same shape, all that kind of stuff. But those slight differences do beg the question, are they made on the same machines? If they're made on the same machines, are the things dialed in the same? Is it just manufacturing, difference machine to machine? Who knows? Okay, now in terms of weight, the Parker weighs 18 grams, the Moonman weighs 20. So those are the dimensions, those are the differences. So we're talking about tenths of millimeters in difference and just a couple of grams. So let's now talk about these criteria that I have set up. So I'll bring out the tray and we'll start with talking about build quality. Now, I've given this one to Parker, and that comes down to a couple of basic things. Firstly, we don't know the longevity of the Moonman. We don't know the longevity of the plastic, but we do know that this Parker 25 has been around for decades and still snaps perfectly. There's no cracking, there's no chipping. Yes, some have and some do, but that depends on how the pen is used. Mine came to me in amazing condition, but the fact that the plastic has stayed in good tact and everything over time, the fact that click is so satisfying. Also, things like the threads, like you can notice there's very little like chewing of the threads there on the Parker, whereas even in this short amount of time of having the Moonman, you can see elements of little bits of chewing. I don't know if the camera will pick it up, like around the seams and things like that. But in saying that, the Moonman's build quality is absolutely fantastic as well. But in terms of knowing that the longevity is here in the Parker, I'm going to give build quality to Parker. Now, finish and aesthetics. A couple of things, once again, put this in the Parker's favor. Firstly, I want to talk about the end cap here. Neither is perfect, but you can see on the Parker, like it's fairly sort of symmetrical. Whereas on the Moonman, if I bring it up nice and close, there's like little gaps and things in it. It's not absolutely perfect. There's like scratches on the clip. Even the Parker, after all this time, the clip looks sensational. The other thing I really enjoy about the Parker is the depth of that blue. So in terms of aesthetics, and of course that stunning wraparound nib the Parker has. So in terms of aesthetics, because the rest of the pen, the tapering for posting and the style of cap and everything is fairly similar, I'm going to give it once again to Parker here. The next criteria is price and value. Now, you can't find a decent Parker 25 for under 50 Australian dollars now, like in decent condition. You just can't. They're all on secondary sale sites like eBay, places like that, and they do cost considerably more. The Moonman, on the other hand, or the Majohn, retails through places like AliExpress for a grand total of about 10 Australian dollars, which is wild. And it's why I have a number of them and why I use them as like everyday carry pens that I throw into a pencil case or chuck in my pocket and stuff when I'm not sort of needing to worry. So price and value does go to the Moonman. We're still talking about the same sorts of materials, plastics and metals, things like that, steel nib. So yeah, going to give that one to the Moonman. I'm also going to give availability to the Moonman. As I said, these are no longer being made. Now, this is a point we're going to have to discuss at some point. This Parker pen is no longer being made by Parker. Yes, Moonman have taken the design. They have made it their own. Now, intellectual copyright and property law and all that kind of stuff does have something to say in here in terms of how long it's been, all that kind of stuff. Parker sold the machines and the factories. Yes, we know that. This is not an original design by Moonman. Can we just agree on that? Whether it is legal or not, it is not an original design. Okay? Let's just leave it at that. But that does play into availability. The Parker is no longer made. You cannot go into a stationery store or jump onto a US retailer or something and just buy a Parker 25. But you can jump on a lot of those sort of particularly Chinese websites like AliExpress and you could buy a dozen of these without even breaking a sweat. Just the way it is. So availability goes to the Moonman. Next, we get nib performance. And for that, we're going to do a writing sample. So I have my standard trusty Clairefontaine 90 GSM paper here. And I've inked these both up with Parker Quink Blue Black. So we have the Parker 25. Now this is a medium, so it's medium versus fine. So that's the only thing that's not going to be entirely fair here. But I'll try and be as fair as I can be. Parker Quink Blue Black. Now I have to say, this nib writes exceptionally well. It's not super wet, it's not super dry, it's a nice, simple, clean flow. It writes consistently and reliably. I've really, really loved writing with this pen. if this pen was more widely available, even at a higher price point, you know what? I'd probably buy a bunch of them. I love this pen. I love the design of it. I love the aesthetic, and I love the way it writes. The Moonman. Moonman Majohn. You can probably hear a singing lesson happening in the background here. That happens in this house. With a fine nib, and once again, Parker, Quink, blue black. Okay, so it writes really well, and it writes reliably. It's just a little bland on the page. I don't know how to describe it. Like, it's not feedbacky or sharp or anything like that. Like, it's consistent, and it's a perfectly enjoyable pen to write with. It is finer there than the medium, obviously. And it's perfectly fine. Like, I have no issue with how that writes. I will say, though, there is something about the Parker, its smoothness, its reliability. There's just something about, like, the roundness of the nib. It's very forgiving. And it just lays down a nice amount of ink. And I'm not talking about medium versus fine. I'm talking about, like, wetness. It's just a nice pen to write with. So ever so slightly, in this one, it's going to go to Parker for the nib performance. But that's so close, and that's surprisingly close given the fact that, one is a $10 Chinese made pen. Okay, next is Ergonomics. I can't split them. The weight is so similar. The dimensions are so similar. The way it posts is so similar. The nib length is so similar. I can't split them, so that has to go down the middle. There's just no way of ignoring that. Design and concept now, I'm giving to Parker for obvious reasons. Parker came up with the pen. They came up with the design. They came up with the aesthetic, all of that. In fact, now I have this, I've been eyeing off a couple of the sets where you get the mechanical pencil, the ballpoint, and the fountain pen. I kind of love that. So yeah, going to go potentially look into that at some point, but that's, a big sort of markup in price to get good condition ones in working order and all that kind of stuff. But it's just a great pen. It's a lovely pen to write with. So I'm giving design and concept, of course, to Parker. Majohn, even if they've done it legally, and, that's not necessarily up for debate, but like where you stand on it is up for debate. That's your own personal opinion on it, and that's absolutely fine. Everyone is going to have different opinions and feelings about this sort of almost direct homage. But yes, the original design was Parker, so I'm giving that one to Parker. Now, the final category I'm going to cover in these comparison videos is X Factor. And now on this one, there's no real X Factor different, that makes them different. If one was a standard cartridge converter pen and the other one was a vac filler, then, that's a X Factor. Or steel nib versus gold nib, that's an X Factor. In these, they're so similar that there is no X Factor that separates them. So, once again, split down the middle. So, let's now talk a couple of pros and cons. We'll start with the Parker. Okay, it's got a great nib. And this design and this sort of style of pen makes a great EDC pen. And most importantly, for my opinion, it's the original, and that's got to stand for something. Surely that's got to stand for something. If you're splitting hairs between, something being mildly better or mildly worse, this is the original. That is the copy, in effect, right? So yes, those are pros. Cons, proprietary cartridge converter. This one didn't come with a converter, so I've been refilling cartridges, the Parker cartridges, sorry. So, filled it with Parker Quink Blue Black here for this one, and then, the converter in there with the same ink. But it is proprietary. The other big con, huge con, is that it's just no longer being made. And what a shame. Like, Parker have done beautiful things, and if they re-release this pen now, it's got a cool retro aesthetic that probably would do quite well. Okay. And maybe that's why Moonman did what they did. I wonder. Now, pros and cons for the Moonman Majohn B25. Firstly, it's cheap, $10 Australian, great. It's super available. You could buy them anytime you want. Just jump online and have them sent to your front doorstep. It's a reliable pen. I've never had an issue with one of them. I said I've got a number of them now and they've all written beautifully. I've got the blue, I've got the black, I've got the orange finishes in this, and just stunning. Lovely pen. Great pen to write with. Easy. No worries. And once again, same thing. Great EDC. It's robust. It's not going to go anywhere. And particularly at this price point, I'm not afraid of losing it or anything like that. Cons, once again, it is proprietary. So Moonman used that. I'm going to move that out of the way. I don't want to get ink on that. That sort of 3.4 millimeter cartridge converter, the Chinese standard as I call it. You can see actually there's a brass liner on the threads there, all that. So, you know, there's a lot going very right for this pen. And the other con, and this is what people will debate, is that it is, yes, a copy. It's not an original design. Whether you agree or not, it is not an original design. There's, it's not like the Jinhao 80, whichever one it was, in the Lamy 2000, where there's slight differences and things. This is pretty much mark for mark. Like, you've got even the logo on the pen, like the Parker logo, and then that sort of spades symbol there. Like, if you think about it, like the geometry of both of those logos, there's definite similarities. It's just what they've done. Slight color differences and lots of good colors available, all that kind of stuff, which is lovely. But it is a copy. Okay, so after all of that, where do I stand? Where do I stand? Well, in the end, I've given it to the Parker, simply because in the hand, both pens are similar. In the end, both write really, really well. But the Parker nib is just a little more pleasant to my hand. Just that sort of forgiving roundness of that nib makes it a joy to write with. Also, it's beautiful to look at. Like, it's a slightly unique kind of design there on the nib. I enjoyed that. Yes, it's more expensive. Yes, it's not as available, but it is the original. And I think that stands for something. And the fact that, like, it has been around for decades. This particular pen wasn't made yesterday. It wasn't made a year ago in a factory in China. So it says made in the UK, actually, on the back there. So, you know, there's a bit of legacy there. It says a lot about the pen model. And I enjoyed a lot. I enjoy having things that are older. I like a few of my vintage pens quite a lot. And while I really enjoy this Moonman B25, I'm going to give it to the Parker on this occasion. Like, it did win 4 points in its own right versus the 2 points to the Moonman, and then they shared 2. So technically, like, on that account, yes, it just wins on plain numbers. But also my enjoyment of it, I'm going to give it to the Parker. So I think it's clear to see, I like both of these pens, and in the end, what it came down to was a couple of simple factors. Majohn have created a pretty good copy of the Parker 25. And we're not talking about intellectual copyright and all that kind of stuff here. We are literally just comparing pen to pen. And that's what it was. So thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. And as I said, memberships are now available to this channel if that's something you are interested in. In the meantime, enjoy writing, enjoy your pens, be they vintage inspired or vintage, and I'll talk to you soon.